Okay, let's take a look at Railburn. This has a funny history for me. This is a game I got to play it once, back at the old Realms of Fantasy, which was my first undergrad school's gaming club. We had it in this stinky old basement. Bart would be down there smoking cigarettes. It wasn't Junta, so we didn't all have cigars. Anyway, in between classes, instead of classes, whatever, sometimes we'd play cards or some board games. Well, we'd almost always be playing something. But often we'd just be hanging out there as well. This game showed up there. There's also, I brought 1830 to this, and had bought 1830 because I was disappointed in this. This was a game I played once, thought, oh, it's so cool, man. It's like Monopoly type thing. I get to move around on the tracks. It's much more realistic feeling than Monopoly in that I'm not like just moving around a board, around spaces on a board. I'm actually running trains on tracks. I'm trying to get from places to places. I'm trying to collect money so I can buy more railroads, and eventually I'm going to reach some victory condition. And it was really exciting. And I asked the guy who brought it, hey, can I borrow this? And he didn't know me very well at that point, so he's like, no, I don't think so. So I went out and bought it. And it was at that time, one of my worst purchases. Since then, I think I've exceeded it quite a bit, but it just doesn't interest me that much, and it's not very good solitaire at all. Let's take a look at the rules, and then, well, I'll do the playthrough just to put myself through some misery. So, I've set up the beginning. Everybody gets 20,000 bucks. What you're going to have is you each roll an initial at the beginning of the game location where you start, and you're going to be using these destination tables, and I did all kind of statistical analysis on them. There's some obvious points though. Things normally come up in the Northeast more than anything else. Big cities are more likely to come up than smaller ones, so things like Rapid City, you're unlikely to go to. You're likely to go to New York, things you'd expect. There are other things that maybe require a little bit of play to come to an idea of how it all works. But after you roll up a starting location, and I'll show you how that happens right off the play. So you roll 3 dice. 2 dice are going to determine the number. 1 die determines if it's an even or an odd number on the chart. So first you roll for region, and you're going to be doing this a lot throughout the game. Okay, so we're rolling up a starting location for this guy. It's odd 10. That's northeast. No big shock there. And now he rolls on the little northeast chart, which is somewhere here, to see which particular city, and that's even 8. That'll be Philadelphia. So the blue player is going to start in Philadelphia. And that particular little mechanism is going to be used throughout the game to see, where you get to go and what you have to do. All right. This is going to be a bitch to video, I can tell you that. Everybody does this, and then they also roll a destination, I think, on their first turn. So when they get their first turn, they do this again to see where their other chip's going to be. And that's going to be where they have to go. This is where their piece starts. The other one's where they have to go. There's a possibility of choice coming up. If you roll the location, the region that you're in, when you're rolling for destination, you have an opportunity to pick your own region. So if there's, a certain size route you want to make, or if there's areas that, you're kind of closed out of because other people are on the track. All right. So the goal of this game is to get to a certain fixed amount of money, but there's a little bit of a twist to that. It's not just, I made it to X amount of money. You have to get to a final destination. You have to declare that you're going to win. So movement for the game, in general, you roll a couple of dice. You might roll an extra one because there's something special that happens. But you roll a couple of dice, and you move along the dots that way. Okay, That's all very easy, right? The extra dice come in with these expansion trains. So if you have an express train, if you roll doubles, you get a third die. If you have a super chief, you get a third die every turn. So you get to roll 3 dice together. The one exception to all of this, even without a bonus train, if you roll 12, you roll the third die as well and add that in. So you get like this supercharged boost of speed for something. Yeah. Okay. So if I'm just moving from location to location, when I get to the location, I follow this wonderful chart. And this was always the bad job in the game, being the guy who has to read this thing. Basically, you cross-reference the city you came from with the city you're going to, but it's cut in half so they don't have to duplicate it. So, for example, if I'm going from Philadelphia. If I go from Philadelphia to, say, Indianapolis, I look those up, I cross-reference, and that's going to make me $7,000 if I make the run from Philadelphia to Indianapolis. Okay, and I can probably make that in a turn. So I roll my dice, I move my mice, and I got to pay some money because you got to pay money to run your train. Now, I think I got to pay $1,000 per turn, so long as I am not running on anyone else's track. But if I'm running on someone else's track, I have to pay $5,000 to that person or people each, no matter how short a segment I'm running on. And if I run on my own track and or bank track, which is all considered the same, and someone else's, I have to pay $1,000 to the bank for the bank track that I'm running on. This led to an interesting discussion of a possible strategy, which was never run on your own track. If two people run on each other's track, if they both have good track, they get away without paying the $1,000 a turn because they're each paying each other $5,000. Well, that's all well and fine as long as A, somebody else agrees to it, and B, you're always running on their track. They have to have a very good network. I've never seen it happen in practice. It would certainly give a slight edge if two people colluded in that way. Okay. At the end of your turn, if you can't pay what you're supposed to pay for your movement, and there's some tricky things in movement here, so let me touch on that in a moment. If you can't pay what you got to pay, well, you got to come up with money. Now, you're allowed to sell. Eventually, you're going to have these shares, ownership of of railroads. You can sell them back to the bank at half price, or you can auction them off to other players. Auctioning them off usually brings you more money. I think the bare minimum bid is half price. It can also get somebody the track at a cheaper price because they will be buying them from the bank at the full price. This costs like $4,000. Well, at an auction price, it would go for a minimum of $2,000, but it could come to $3,000 and both people could be happy. Or it could actually shoot well above the list price if it's an important piece of track. And you have to keep selling railroads off until you can pay your entire fine. If you still can't pay it after you've sold everything off, you're out of the game. You're bankrupt. Okay. That very seldomly happens. Usually you straggle along through the game in really bad shape. Anything else here? Yeah. The victory conditions in the game. At the end of the game, once you reach $200,000, let's see, you must return to your home city with $200,000 or more in cash. But before you can do that, you have to declare that you're going to win at the start of your trip. That you have the $200,000 and then you're on your way home. Now, people can do something kind of tricky here called rover play. If you're in this trip. Now, when you make this final trip, you have to roll for an alternate destination. If you fall below the 200,000 at any point in the trip, you got to switch to that alternate destination. It becomes a normal run. So once you make it to the end, you have to reach your home city with $200,000 in cash before anyone else catches you after you declared your victory. You don't get any kind of payoff for getting there unless it happens to be your alternate destination. Now, once you've declared, anybody can move onto or through your pawn, and they get $50,000 from you. And then he's no longer declared. He has to go back. So it's difficult, and especially in a six-player game, to necessarily be able to make it to your home destination. And actually, the guy who introduced me to this game's got a special prize one year at the WBC for, I don't remember if it was winning or losing this game with the most money. I think he won a game of it with the biggest prize, with the biggest cash they ever had, just because he was stuck, unable to actually win, and people kept, trying to position themselves to rover him. We didn't usually see much of that, and it's really not too worth it. It really ends up just dragging the game out. If you're close and someone else is about to it declares to win, it might be worth chasing them. But if you're not close, it probably is pretty questionable unless you just get the opportunity that kind of falls on you from easy location. I'm certainly not going to play it that in that bloody manner. That's about it for the game. Got bunches and bunches of these stocks. They represent, or certificates, they represent the different rail lines on the board in different symbols. I'm trying to think, is there something I'm missing? Of course, I got nice paper money. Love paper money now. This is not pleasant. Avalon Hill didn't make good money. All right, well, I'll start my playthrough. Come back when I've got that set up, and we'll show you a round or two of it at first, and then I'll go to a more abstracted view of the whole thing because it's kind of tough. One problem with it for solitaire, I'm of course going to be going counterclockwise. One problem with it for solitaire is that all the chips that represent the color end up on the board, so I'm going to have to use dice or something to indicate who's who.